Well, hello, everybody. This is Brendan Baylott from the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Group. I believe we're live. The countdown is always wrong that it gives me, so I can never tell when we actually start recording. But I'm assuming we're on. So welcome, everybody, to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Group and to our show, our weekly program, Great Lakes Shipwrecks Live. I really appreciate everybody who's joined us. We have a great show in store for you tonight. All the way from the Great Lakes state of Michigan, we've got Kevin Ailes tonight with us. Kevin is a guest that I've been looking forward to having for a long time. So thank you, everybody, and feel free to post your comments to let us know that you're listening. Looks like people are already starting to post, so thank you for that, and I hope you enjoy the show. A little bit of housekeeping stuff I want to take care of before we get to Kevin. First of all, to celebrate our 2000th member in the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Group, I announced that we're going to have an online shipwreck festival this weekend, which is the case. We have a hell of a program set up, probably that would rival any Great Lakes Shipwreck Festival that was held in person. For those of us who are locked in and can't go out and socialize in large numbers, this is a great opportunity to hear some really interesting people doing great things on the Great Lakes. So the program is going to start off at 10 a.m. Central Time, so that's 11 a.m. Eastern, with Chris Roxburgh. And many of you who follow the group know Chris's work. You've seen his just stunning underwater video and photos. Chris is a social media producer. He's an all-around really interesting guy who does a lot of cool stuff on the Great Lakes. So I'm real excited to have Chris be our first presenter to kick off the event. And then you're going to get me. I am doing my brand new talk titled "Filthy with Shipwrecks," about the Fox Islands of Lake Michigan, which has just a ridiculous number of shipwrecks. Many of them have never been dived and never been identified because it's such a remote area. So join me for that show. It's going to be a good one. Then we're going to have an hour break where I'm going to set up a Zoom room where those people who want to socialize with other shipwreck geeks can join us in the Zoom room. I will have a link to that before the conference starts, so you'll be able to join us. Then we have three presenters that I think you all know. Rick Mixter, who was our first guest ever on Great Lakes Shipwrecks Live. Wes Olszewski, the well-known author, who was also one of our previous guests. Then we've got Tammy Thompson is going to be presenting. She is the state underwater archaeologist of Wisconsin. She's going to be talking about putting shipwrecks on the National Register of Historic Places. And then our headliner is Jerry Eliason, a really well-known wreck hunter who's found more wrecks on Lake Superior than anyone else. And so really looking forward to having Jerry. He's going to talk about the deep wrecks off the Keweenaw that were found this summer, namely the Hudson and the SR Kirby. The show will culminate with a social hour. Bring your own beverage, and we'll all have drinks and some socialization for an hour. So please join us for the first annual Inland Seas Online Shipwreck Festival this Saturday. All right, let's talk about Great Lakes Shipwrecks Live. Kevin Ailes obviously is joining us tonight, but our next guest next week is going to be Mark Sprang, who is the archivist for the historical collections of the Great Lakes at Bowling Green State University. So for anyone who does, shipwreck research, that, the collection there at Bowling Green is one of the most important collections of original Great Lakes vessel information in existence. They have an excellent online database of vessels. They have many people have donated their collections there. They have all sorts of rare archival material. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Mark talk about the historical collections of the Great Lakes. Should be a great show. All right. Those are most of our housekeeping things. We do have a number of other guests that I've been adding. We're going to keep this show going weekly. probably until the restrictions are lifted, and then we'll probably go down to monthly for the summer because most of us are hopefully going to be out on the water at some point. So without further ado, everybody, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Kevin Ailes. Kevin is the Vice President of the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council, the President of the Southwestern Michigan Underwater Preserve, and he is really a mover and a shaker in the world of Great Lakes shipwreck preservation in the state of Michigan. So Kevin, welcome. It's great to have you.
Well, thank you, Brendan, for having me here. I'm just a guy that has a big passion for shipwrecks. I'm glad to be on board. We have the greatest diveable wrecks in the world here in the Great Lakes. We have folks that come from all over the world to dive our shipwrecks. We have people come all over the country to dive our shipwrecks. It's just surprising how many people in the immediate area are unaware of them. Now, I know we have a group here who is very familiar with our shipwrecks. Most of you folks are divers. More power to you. You are in the shipwreck mecca, my friends. Enjoy it.
Very, very true, Kevin. Very true. We're really fortunate to have people like you that are helping those people access those wrecks in a responsible way. So, for those of us out there who don't know you, perhaps as well as I do, I'll ask the usual question I ask all our guests, just to help people get to know you a little bit and a little bit about your background. Kevin, like I say, it's a sort of an unusual thing, right? A lot of people are into baseball or football or hockey, and you're into shipwrecks. How did you get bit by the bug? And tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, it actually started quite young for me. My father, we were vacationing, came across the bones of the Lydia schooner up in Manistee. I believe we have a slide for the Lydia there. One of the news clippings there, slides early in slide number 2, perhaps. But it was a schooner that came ashore that during a blow about 1909, and we were just seeing the bones of it there. And my brothers and I were young teens, and this is, of course, before we had Facebook and phones to keep us otherwise occupied, and it was quite intriguing. And it just kind of got me interested in what was underwater out there. And I'd heard stories about boats, and I'd heard stories about all kinds of curious things in the water, but that sparked the interest for me. Then beyond that, it was a matter of being, at a point in my life, I could take the training, become a scuba diver. That wasn't until about 7 years ago, actually. And, once I got down there and was able to see these shipwrecks, like so many folks, it's when you actually able to put your hands on these boats, when you are able to dive. And here in the Great Lakes, you can put your hands on the shipwreck if you want. Now, of course, do it in a very responsible fashion. Don't touch anything that's going to be damaged. Take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but bubbles. You can touch it if you want to, but please be responsible about it. But to be able to go down there and put your hands, swim through the hole that sunk the boat, see the actual evidence of these stories. It was just a connection that I could not get enough of. And back more and more, and over time, I began to, be very passionate about saving these for future generations. Many of us have seen the pictures of what they looked like, decades ago, back when we had, 6 inch visibility or 3 foot visibility was a great day. And now we often have days of up to, I've had 75 foot visibility down there. Some have had better. It's incredible what we have today. But just, these are all time capsules, and I want to see them preserved for the next generation. I want many people to be able to enjoy these here. This is all part of our past, our history. And anyone who has roots in this area, if you research your genealogy, you'll find names of professions there, such as deckhand or first mate. Basically, almost any profession listed in historical directories as a mate of some sort means that they're working on a boat. And you'd be amazed just how many of us here in the Midwest have roots from working on the boats.
Very, very good points, Kevin. I know that a lot of people aren't aware that the Great Lakes at one time were the equivalent of the modern freeway system, and they were the main artery of commerce that fueled the whole industrial revolution in this country. And so, a lot of people aren't aware that, everyone had ties to the Great Lakes and had ties to these ships. And so these ships, they're better preserved than ships anywhere in the world. They're a real tangible tie to our past. And I really applaud you for the work that you're doing to, teach people about that and then to make those ships accessible to them.
Well, we have such great shipwrecks here. And of course, we have a very active dive community, particularly in the southern part of the state, who want to get out there and see these shipwrecks. But then it's always, a challenge because, there hasn't been a consistent mooring program, which we're going to get into throughout the program here about, getting a regular line and buoy. So when you bring your dive boat up to it, you can actually just tie up to a rope from the buoy as opposed to trying to anchor the wreck. Uh, these wrecks have been anchored over and over and over again. And over time, it does a significant amount of damage, which we're going to talk about later in the program as well. So if you can avoid it, please don't put your anchor in the wreck. But, you got to be safe as well.
So, Kevin, why don't you tell me a little bit about the Mooring Buoy program, and I'll go ahead and share some slides of that. How do you guys what do you do to buoy a wreck, or tell me a little bit about the Mooring Buoy program?
Well, as you're seeing in the slides that Brendan has up right now, it's not a very glamorous process. I wish I could show you some nice presentation about this being glamorous and fun and clean and crisp and everything clicks. But a lot of it we're having to manage these individually, acquire materials for them individually. But it's a cooperative. The Michigan Shipwreck Mooring Buoy project is a cooperative effort between the Michigan DNR, the United States Coast Guard. The moorings are designed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Great Lakes Carriers Association. This is the organization which represents all the freighters on the Great Lakes. They are in agreement with the program. There's some areas they're a little, they could be more pleased on some areas. They were given the right to veto a lot of the wrecks to be moored. Some of the wrecks we can't moor because they are too close in the shipping lanes. And we don't want to have something where we're putting a buoy where it's going to end up in the propeller of a large freighter. That doesn't benefit anyone there. But as far as mooring them individually, it's all kind of based upon the local conditions, primarily the depth. There are different mooring systems for putting a buoy on. If the buoy is going to be in an area which is less than, I believe, 40 feet deep, we're able to use a more simplified system there. Brendan, near the end of the presentation, there should be 2 slides which have schematics on the buoys at the very end of the presentation there. Pretty close to the end there. Nope, not quite that far. There should be 2 slides that have schematics of the buoys. Hope I sent you the right version there.
I
should
think
be quite near the end of the slides there.
There we go.
Yes, there we go. There's a more simplified version there. That's a more complicated version. Now, the slide that Brendan has up right now is for our deep water wrecks. This is technically anything which is deeper than 40 feet. As you can see in the slide, we have an anchor at the bottom. We do not secure these to the shipwreck. Over time, it's been shown without fail that when a buoy is secured to a shipwreck, eventually it does damage to the wreck, whether it rips off the rail or tears out whatever article it is attached to. You got to keep in mind that we have dive boats up to 30 feet long, which are securing to these things. A 30-foot long boat is easily 10,000 pounds. That's a substantial amount of weight pulling on these here. Now, hopefully, people are diving these things only in reasonable conditions, because if you pull up to this thing with a 30-foot boat and 6-footers, you probably could move that. Now, I don't think anyone's diving in 6-footers. I certainly hope not. These have a minimum of 1,000 pounds of ballast on the bottom. As you see, there is a subsurface float, which we set right around 15 feet. That's where you can do your safety stop. Now, don't rely upon that to be 15 feet. We target that, but that can vary a little bit. So still do your safety stop based upon your depth gauge in your computer there. But from there, from the subsurface line, we have a chain that secures to the buoy. And these buoys, Brendan, I think near about 4 slides ahead of this, we actually have some pictures of the individual buoys there. And these are genuine Coast Guard approved navigational buoys. Now, once they are installed, the individual preserve will contact the Coast Guard and inform them that has been a buoy installed on this certain shipwreck. And we give them GPS numbers, and we tell them exactly where, what it is and where it is. And they will, it's actually added to the digital charts of the freighters out there, that they don't actually use paper charts anymore, but they have a digital system now. Not seeing that slide, but maybe there we go. That is one of our navigational buoys there. Those, I believe, are 48 inches tall. They've got a significant amount of ballast in the bottom. They weigh about 138 pounds. There is a solar charged strobe light on the top. So it's a night beacon there. All the buoys will have the permit number. Interestingly, all of the buoys in the Great Lakes are done under the same permit. This has all been approved by the Department of Environmental Quality. The Michigan DNR actually is a subdivision of Department of Environmental Quality, and they're all on board with this here. Like I say, it's a pretty involved process to put the buoy in. To actually be part of the buoy team, there are requirements for that. We have a number of emails back and forth with different DNR officials, primarily from Wayne Lusardi, and to be a DNR diver, we are operating actually as volunteers of the DNR doing this. So to put the buoys in, you have to be a registered DNR volunteer diver, and there are some requirements for that. Now, it does vary a little bit from preserve to preserve as to the requirements for it, because some preserves have been a little bit more stringent on the requirements than others have there. But the requirements are, well, actually, I should say there are minimum base requirements which we all come down to, but some preserves have added a little bit to that. Because we want to have good quality divers down there doing this. We want to keep everyone safe. For instance, for the Southwest Michigan Underwater Preserve that I manage, our requirements there, and mostly to come directly from Wayne Lusardi, are you have to be a minimum of advanced open water diver, have to be certified for the depths we're going to be working at, which vary from buoy to buoy. I have some people that I would put use on the Havana Shipwreck buoy shown here, which is 55 feet. I have different people that I'll be using to put buoys on the North Shore Tug, which the bottom there is 150, and different other people for the Ann Arbor number 5, because the bottom there is 158. Now we're in tech depth, and of course that's beyond what a recreational diver is going to do. I'll get back into the requirements though. Also want our divers to be, and this is from Wayne Lusardi as well, want our divers to be O2 provider qualified. That's generally a card you get through PADI or DAN or different diving organizations. Want to have CPR qualification certification and basic first aid certification, and we ask that our people verify that their medical insurance does cover diving emergencies. Not all medical insurance does cover diving emergencies. We are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3. We want everyone to operate safely, but we are not providing medical insurance for this here. So you have to have your own insurance. So verify that you either have DAN insurance, which of course covers diving related emergencies, or talk to your individual healthcare provider to confirm that you have that. There's also, because we are involved with the DNR, there is a 4-page form to be filled out. There are requirements on this here. This is not installing buoys is not for many divers. you're doing a working dive. You generally, of course, the deeper you go, the less exertion you want to do. Don't want to worry about CO2 buildup or running low on air, because if you are working, you're going through your air faster. Uh, a lot of these we're kind of looking at them individually, and we kind of figure, okay, we know the visibility here is bad. We know there's some current. How are we going to do this today? And each dive is differently. It's a lot of fun. We have very dedicated divers on our teams. I mean, now you're diving with a purpose. I mean, it's always great to go down there and take pictures, but now you're working at protecting these shipwrecks and providing a better environment for your scuba divers. Because when you're down there on these dives, you got to realize that these shipwrecks, you see damage done to them over the years. Anchors have done damage to them. Divers have taken them. We'll get into that another time later on. But these are also our heritage. These are ours. I mean, we are so fortunate to be able to dive these so freely here in the Great Lakes. I mean, in the American Great Lakes, I should say. Because if you go to Canada, it's a little different deal over there. I guess I'm kind of getting a little bit off topic here, so I'll give the microphone back to Brendan here, and we can continue there. But in a nutshell, and that is a nutshell, how we set these buoys up.
Really interesting stuff, Kevin. I guess and many of our viewers probably aren't aware that big mooring buoy diving is working diving. It's not just fun time. Go look at the shipwreck diving. You have to, you're doing a working dive when you put in a mooring buoy. So, really interesting stuff. And I guess one of the things that I would mention too, Wayne Lasardi. I know you mentioned him a number of times. For those of you who are watching from other states, Wayne is our is the state underwater archaeologist in Michigan. He works for the DNR and is really the chief officer in the state of Michigan who's responsible for ensuring that the wrecks are not damaged. So really good advocate for wrecks.
Yeah, and Wayne is a great guy to work with. We're very fortunate in Michigan that our state maritime archaeologist is very much in support of the public diving these shipwrecks. That is not the case in all of the states around the Great Lakes. There is a little more resistance. You'll find a whole lot less state support as far as the mapping and the online resources. Here in the Great Lakes, the higher ups in the DNR and in NOAA really want us to appreciate and enjoy our shipwrecks, and they'll do everything they can within the bounds of their offices to facilitate that.
Very cool. Well, Kevin, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the other thing that you do, and that is that you are the vice president of the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council. And I can tell you from my own experience, there are 13 underwater preserves in Michigan, and one of them is from my native area, the Copper Country. The Keweenaw Peninsula has an underwater preserve, and I was one of the very early people involved in it. And I know a number of our viewers from the Copper Country are still active up there, even though we don't buoy the wrecks anymore. But it was something that, when the Mesquite sank up there, the Coast Guard cutter, we decided to pursue putting in an underwater shipwreck preserve up there. And for years, local dive charters benefited from it. And the community became much more aware of the shipwrecks that people hadn't been aware of before. So I was involved in the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council, 20 years ago. But then I moved to Wisconsin, of course, and so we have our own shipwrecks here in Wisconsin. So tell me a little bit about your work in the MUPC, and tell us about the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council and what they do.
Well, Brendan, I want to caution you there. I'm really enjoying what you're telling me about your interest in the preserves. I might find a place for you over here. You could certainly use your talents as well.
I'd be happy to be involved with the Keweenaw again.
Okay, be careful. We're going to talk more about that later. So, okay. As far as the Michigan Water Preserve Council, it was a different environment for scuba diving back throughout the 80s well, prior to the 80s, and it was early 1990s when people started becoming aware of how important these shipwrecks were and how much you wanted to preserve them. Now, the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council actually operates as a voice for the preserves in general, or the collective voice. Now, another slide I have here has a picture of our website. Yes, this one here. And across the top of that does have our mission statement, which I'm not going to go. That's a pretty good mouthful. But the cliff notes of that is that we are the voice for the preserves in general. We do work to educate the public on the shipwreck's presence. We do work to make them more available to the public. We work to educate the public on the infrastructure, the resources, the dive charters, the dive shops in the area. Now, we don't sell anything. We do give recommendations. If you come to the different trade shows, Our World Underwater, Shipwreck Festival in Ann Arbor. There's another one over there in Sandusky we'll be attending this year. I don't have the names in front of me exactly, but there are a number of shipwreck trade shows, and you'll see our booth there. And we're mostly giving recommendations. So someone asks me, well, hey, I want to dive at the Straits. Where do I go? Okay, well, take a look at the website, and here's our charter I can recommend for you here. And go ahead and head up there, and make sure you call first and make reservations. You need to, of course, make your own lodging reservations, your own charter reservations. But we really want to encourage folks to come on up and have a good time on our shipwrecks. And we educate folks on them as well. We do communicate directly, with the DNR and different legislative folks on this. Often people have questions about diving in the Great Lakes, and our website, Michigan Preserves, is very easy to find. Comes up very high in your search results when you look for anything about Michigan shipwrecks. We get contacted quite a bit from folks who want to organize a dive group over here. We get people coming in from Europe, Asia, large groups. They want to know what the conditions are. The Great Lakes wrecks here. Most divers have heard of what we have here. There are different areas in the world which have great shipwrecks. Many have heard about the wonderful ones in the Baltic Sea, and there are a number of them throughout Europe in very deep areas which are very well preserved. But we're so fortunate we can dive these. 80% of our known shipwrecks in the Great Lakes, you can dive in a wetsuit. Okay, you're not going to get that when you're diving in the Baltic. Now, there are a few there, but generally anything which is in recreational depth, visibility is horrible. And there are places in Europe that do have wonderful shipwrecks that are still have the rope on them. You can still see the wood carvings, but they're sending ROVs down there. And here in the Great Lakes, recreational divers with adequate training, can go see these shipwrecks. And the Michigan Water Preserves, it's a group of folks. I know Ron Bloomfield was very much involved with it, organizing the MUPC. And we have the individual preserves, which there are 13 of them. If you look at our website, you'll see there are hyperlinks, each individual preserve. That's the background drop here on the slide that Brendan has on the page right now. And if you click on any of those hyperlinks, you will be taken to another page on the website for that individual preserve. And on those individual pages will be a brief bio of many of the shipwrecks. There will be GPS numbers for anywhere from 8 to 25 shipwrecks, depending upon what is marked in that preserve. Some indications of what you're going to find as far as current or depth. Again, do your research before you do one of these dives. If you go with a reputable charter, they'll be able to steer you towards the shipwrecks which are in your diving capability. I know there are a lot of folks that bring their own boats up there and plan their own dives, and hey, more power to them. Just be very aware of the conditions here. There's a good reason why we have so many shipwrecks here in the Great Lakes. Brendan, how many shipwrecks do we have in the Great Lakes?
Well, that's a difficult question because you have to talk about how many of them are diveable versus how many were lost due to a shipwreck versus scuttling. But there are probably about 5 to 6,000 vessels that were totally lost on the Great Lakes, and of those, maybe 1,500 of them have extant remains that would be considered diveable. So that's some big numbers.
Yeah, that's an awful lot of shipwrecks. And on the Michigan Water Preserve website there, throughout the preserve, you'll find the GPS numbers of approximately 200 shipwrecks, which are diveable. Now, these are varying conditions. Some of these are, deeper water wrecks. We have a few of them that are slightly beyond sport depth, but nothing too much beyond sport depth. Most everything you're going to find there is in the accepted range of 130 feet for. Hey, Brendan, are you getting me okay? I'm getting a message here that says audio only. Are you getting my video feed too?
Yeah, I have your video right now so people can see the larger thing here.
Okay. Yeah, great.
You're back up.
Okay. I'm a little unfamiliar with Brendan's page here. I'm learning this totally here. But like I say, take a look at our page, and you'll see all kinds of information on shipwrecks. And this is also a big part of what got me interested in scuba diving, was coming across this page, and also mention Michigan Shipwrecks, which is MSRA's page, Michigan Shipwreck Research Association. There, between these two pages, this really got me hooked into scuba diving. When you see what's down there, and there are so many books out there, Brendan has a page there that I don't want to misquote it there. Brendan, what's the name of your website again?
Well, I have a lot of different web pages. Not sure which one you're referring to. Are you talking about the Facebook group?
No, I know you have a page that has a lot of bios on the shipwrecks.
I have
It's one of your pages.
Well, I have a page on the Keweenaw Underwater Preserve, but I have the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Group, which is a social media group. But then I have a lot of other web pages up just about all sorts of many different topics in research. So it's kind of fractured right now. But I used to have a lot of online research databases up, things like that. But basically, most of my stuff is about specific shipwrecks in specific areas.
Yeah. Well, they're wonderful shipwrecks. I can't say enough about them. And that they are our shipwrecks. Anyone who has roots here, you probably had family that worked the boats. One of the slides I have here is actually of my great uncle. Doing my own research, came across information that the Spartan was actually captained throughout the 60s by my great uncle. And now I had no idea that this gentleman was. You see this here. Look at the slide. There he is. There he is. Can you pull that one up there?
Yep.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, it's Yep, that would be Captain Carl Ullman there, and hey, he's my mother's brother. Makes him my great uncle.
That's an
apparently
that's an interesting thing. My mom's husband Jim worked on the Spartan for the entire 60s and served under that captain.
I'm sure they knew each other. I've actually met up with his stepson, Joseph Kincaidis, and according to what Joseph was telling me, because I never met Carl Ullman. Unfortunately, he passed away a year after I was born. But he was a real down-to-earth, friendly guy. He knew most of his people on the boat. Now, there's kind of a rotation of folks coming and going, so probably couldn't know every one of them's family story. But the Ludington boats, the which were mostly the Pure Marquette boats, and then later on Spartan, Badger, Midland. There are many boats based out of Ludington there, mostly car ferries. And I'm talking railroad car ferries. Strong family business, very much family oriented and multi-generational businesses there. So, say if you are from this area, even if you're not from this area, you may not have roots in the Great Lakes freighters, but you may really have roots in the either one of the coasts or the Gulf. You look up, on the Mississippi River, tremendous amount of shipping traffic going up and down the Mississippi River. That's why we call it shipping, because everything used to come by boat. So, but
so Kevin, a couple of wrecks you wanted to talk about that are really good cases for preservation: the Barnum, the Sandusky, the Marshall. What can you tell me about some of those wrecks?
okay, well, I have a slide. Several slides are on the Barnum. I believe they're not that far into the presentation I've sent you. I gave Brendan a PowerPoint that I normally do for talking about these shipwrecks here. There's a Sandusky. We should be pretty close to Barnum here. But yeah, there we go. There's the Barnum. Oh, wow. This is, we are very fortunate to have the Barnum here. I mean, it's only 70 feet deep here. Maybe maximum 75 feet deep. As you see, it's extremely intact shipwreck. It's quite large. I want to say about 230 feet, maybe 220. But it's a really impressive shipwreck. Now, the pictures you're seeing here, this is a little bit better than average visibility. It's a split slide on the left. We have actually my fiance, Amy Schuring, is the diver pictured there. And she's just about to drop the regulator out of her mouth because she's so impressed with how magnificent that bow is. And then you have the stern of the shipwreck here, which is quite broken up. Now, the Barnum was built in 1873, sank April 3rd of 1894. Interestingly enough, the owners of the ships had managed to talk the insurance agency into one more trip for the boat, and they were going to lay it up and fix it after that. Didn't work out too well for the insurance company because the boat ended up having problems with the ice in the straits early season and was leaking very badly. A call for help went out. The crew was taken off. No one died on the ship. And the boat was known about where it was and was found, I believe, in the 1980s, and was a very popular dive site. Now, another slide here I have of the rudder of the boat. These group of divers, well-intentioned folks, wanted to put the rudder on display so the non-diving community could see it there. And the Barnum rudder now sits in St. Ignace right behind the, there it is, yes, behind the, I believe it's a True Value store up there in St. Ignace. It's right between the marina and the hardware store. And it's actually held up quite well, considering this has been out of the water for better than 30 years. It's, often these things, start deteriorating, but of course the rudder is going to be solid, everything's oak on that rudder there. And but there it is. But unfortunately, they used dynamite to separate it from the stern of the ship. And now the stern of the ship, as you've seen in the previous slide, is pretty well destroyed. It's quite impressive, to see this huge back end of a boat, and you can still make out all kinds of structure there. But these guys blew it up. Now, they had good intentions with sharing the rudder with folks, but it severely damaged the shipwreck here. Another one I want to tell you a story a little bit about is the Sandusky. Sandusky is one of the oldest ships in the Straits. It's a brig, built 1848, lost in 1856. This slide here is something I borrowed from the Michigan, Straits Underwater Preserve website, but it was discovered by Chuck Feltner, 1981, and these folks were just amazed at how intact this shipwreck was. I encourage you to go to YouTube and look up the Sandusky, and you'll find footage of it today. You'll find footage of it when it was first found, and this boat was completely there when they found it. The wheel was sitting there, which means it was a virgin shipwreck, never been dove before. It's a sad story. It went missing in the Straits, lost with all hands. But when it was found, one of the unique features on it was it had a scrolling figurehead. And there's a slide right there that shows the scrolling figurehead. Now, there's a little bit of discussion as to what it represents because it's a little eroded, but most people kind of focus around it being a ram's head. Shortly after the wreck was found, though, word got out about it. People dive it and they talk, especially after a few pints. I do that sometimes, not a few pints. But the figurehead came up missing. And at first there was a big uproar thinking it had been stolen. Sounds more as though that it was taken off so it wouldn't be stolen because it was loose, and it was returned. It spent some time at the NOAA facility up in Alpena. It is currently on display at the Maritime Museum in Mackinac City. If you do go to Mackinac City, one of the little secrets, which you don't find advertised up there very well, is that the old lighthouse, which is just to the east of the bridge, on the south side of the bridge there, is now a museum. And there is a pretty good size facility there dedicated to shipwrecks. And if you go in there, you'll find a lot of details on the Sandusky, Eber Ward, many, many shipwrecks up there. Cedarville, huge exhibit on the Cedarville. But again, we have a slide here also from the Straits Preserve page that back that one right there. Yes, I mean there's the windlass. You have a bowsprit right there. This is only 85 feet deep, but it has suffered. Like I say, the figurehead that's on it now is a replacement. It's a reproduction. It was replaced. Some divers with their own money, rebuilt the figurehead and placed it on the boat. I do know that the steering wheel, just have the end of a picture of the steering wheel, it's in pieces now. Dive boat hooked the entire area of the steering wheel and unseated it. It was put back, but it's pretty well demolished now. This boat was so intact when they found it that the bilge pumps still had the leather plungers in them, and you could work the bilge pumps. Unfortunately, people did work the bilge pumps, and now they're all falling apart now. So, like I say, I tell folks that you can touch the shipwrecks, but be very careful about it because these are fragile shipwrecks. They're not going to last forever. They last a long time, but not forever. But that's the Sandusky, which could have benefited from some better protection under the laws we have today. We also have the J.D. Marshall. J.D. Marshall actually is in Indiana water. There used to be a very high appetite primarily in the Midwest for shipwreck wood. It was a gentleman by the name of James Sautelli up by Leelanau area had 2 full-time shops making tables and all decorating penthouses with shipwreck wood. And it was so popular that the slide has the propeller for the J.D. Marshall and also has a little picture of the J.D. Marshall on it too. I believe there are actually 3 pictures on the slide for the J.D. Marshall there. A little further up.
Stay there.
I'm sorry, these aren't exactly in the order in what we're talking about today. There we go. There's J.D. Marshall there. That back one. There you go.
Sorry about that.
But, wonderful. You're great. You're great. But the boat actually turtled in a storm 1909, or actually 1911. Sat upside down in about 20 feet of water for up into the 1980s. 1982, a group from Chicago came over. They actually loaded up the boat, put it on a couple of barges, and were in the process taking it over to Chicago to cut it up into tables. Now, you don't do an operation like that without getting a little bit of attention. And the authorities paid them a visit. The boat was rather hastily placed back after removing the propeller off of it. And now the J.D. Marshall sits in about 35 feet of water, upside down, and it's kind of flat. Although it's still a very worthwhile dive. There are mooring buoys around it, placed there by Indiana Parks. You can't actually anchor in this area. You have to use a mooring buoy. Visibility there tends to run anywhere from 0 to 15 feet. I have had up to 15-foot visibility down there out of like maybe 3 or 4 dives on it. It's basically the upside down stern section of a boat. A lot of structure there you could recognize though. For a novice diver, it's a really, really cool dive. But again, this boat did not fare well due to a lack of protection in 1982. And it was incidents like these I've mentioned to you is what got the attention of the dive community throughout the 80s and early 90s that we needed to have some protection on these. And the Michigan Preserve System was established. We have a charter with the state. There is additional protection for the shipwrecks in the area. I have a slide there which shows, actually it's of the Ironsides, but I have on the sidebar listing of the different legislation which protects shipwrecks there. And there is a fair amount of legislation which protects the shipwrecks, but well, for the most part, we have to go on the honor system. That we love the shipwrecks. Want to see them. There we go. Back one. There we go. And say I have listed there 3 different sets of laws, 4 different sets of laws, which actually protect shipwrecks. It actually never truly was legal to pull things off of shipwrecks. Finders keepers does not apply to anything that has a title. These ships have titles. They're owned by somebody, but everybody was doing it. 1980s, you could get $400 for a porthole, more if you had glass in it. And your buddy might come back with one of those portholes, and next week he'd sold it and bought a brand new set of double hose regulators. And that's what they did. And everyone was doing it. And today we wouldn't do that, but it was a different environment then. So we need to have protection on these shipwrecks. That's why the preserves were established. The main law we have in effect today is the Abandoned Shipwreck Act that provides federal protection for the shipwrecks. All these shipwrecks have state protections, federal protections, civil protection as well, because they are owned by someone. There have been cases of individuals owning shipwrecks. Individual, Harry Zeich, when he found the Lady Elgin, actually petitioned the courts. He located the insurance company which owned the Elgin, and he bought the Lady Elgin. That was part of it. It's part of his estate today. Last I knew, you actually needed to have permission from him to dive that shipwreck. Although he passed away, I believe, 4 years ago. I'm not quite sure what the procedure would be for diving Lady Elgin today, but I'm sure there's a procedure. Here in the Michigan Great Lakes, you don't need permission. You don't need permission from the Canadian government. But, you go dive, enjoy them, but be safe.
So Kevin, I'm gonna just reload the page here because it's not letting me put us back on the screen. Hang in for just a second.
Okay.
All right, and we are back.
Looking good. Great.
So I just want to encourage everybody who is watching, feel free to ask questions. If you have a question for Kevin, we'll take those in real time as we're doing the show here. So Kevin, I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit. I know we had talked about the Southwestern Michigan Underwater Preserve, and I think I've got their page queued up here. They are an organization that obviously you're intimately familiar with as their president. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Southwestern Michigan Underwater Preserve and some of the wrecks that are there?
Yeah, I actually wear several hats within the diving community, and one of them is president of the Southwest Michigan Underwater Preserve. This is underwater preserve which runs from Port Sheldon, just north of Holland, down to the Indiana state line. We have, I believe, 13 shipwrecks in there we have on our site, plus there are several individual, well, there are other features as well. There are some clay walls and different features to see there. You see the GPS numbers of the shipwrecks. It's here on this side of the lake, because we are on the downwind side of the lake, the shallower stuff does kind of take a beating. Now, we do have a number of cool dives in shallow water, but they are kind of broken up. We have the Rockaway, which is in 70 feet of water. But it's a nice, if you're advanced open water, it's a good visibility, lots of fish to see down there. Havana's only 55 feet of water. But we also have some that are quite intact. They're a little bit deeper. The Ann number 5 is one, which it actually sits in 158 feet of water. But curiously enough, because the way the wreck is angled into the bottom, which unfortunately I don't think I have a slide of that here, it does, well, actually, if you look at the page, yeah, if you look at the website page there, the picture that's featured on our page is of the propeller of the Ann number 5. Now, this is actually only half of a railroad car ferry. The ship was actually used as a breakwall when they were building the Palisades Power Plant, 1968 to 1970. Then the ship was in bad enough shape from the ice and the storms that they cut up and clamshelled the bow portion of the boat, sent it back over to a barge to Waukegan to be scrapped. They believe that the group that was salvaging it, Boltima's Salvage, based on Muskegon at the time, they wanted to float the stern section over to Waukegan to be scrapped. Didn't work out too well for them. They got about, I believe, 8 miles offshore and started taking on water, and down it went. They barely got their guys off the boat in time. I'm actually taking some of this information here from the write-up on Michigan Shipwrecks.org. But the ship went down, didn't take anyone with it. No one died on the boat, but it speared the bottom. And reports indicate it hit the bottom hard enough the guys on the surface heard it hit the bottom. And to this day, it sits there looking like a great big lawn dart stuck in the bottom at about a 45 degree, now about a 60-degree angle. And it is, you talk about a cool dive. I mean, when you come up on this boat and you see half of a boat jammed in the bottom at this precarious angle that tells you, how could this ever last? But it's been there for 50 years now in that position. There is some buckling, and the hull's looking, the decking shows it might be flexing somewhat, but hope it doesn't go down when your boat's tied to it there. It's probably going to go down some year and lay flat during a storm. But you talk about a cool dive. You know, there are a lot of burbot in the area. Visibility tends to run around 50 feet on an average dive. You know, I've had visibility where from the top of the boat, you see the bottom of the boat, that's 100 feet there from, you know, high end to the low end there. It's a really, really cool dive. You know, this was a railroad car ferry. There are tracks on it for carrying railroad cars. It actually was an early predecessor of the like the Spartan and Badger, which we have today. You know, those ships were originally built to carry railroad cars, and we had a huge business throughout the Great Lakes of transporting railroad cars across Lake Michigan. Go into the story of that another time, but in any event, many of these railroad car ferries were going across the Great Lakes. This actually ran out of Ann Arbor. Actually, excuse me, not Ann Arbor. Ran out of Frankfort, which is just north of Ludington. You know, competing ship to the Ludington boats. But very cool dive. Very cool dive. Some different stories of how it was found. It was most recently documented in MSRA's, Michigan Shipwreck Research Association, hunt for Flight 2501. They came across it, I believe, in the late 90s, early 2000s. There are stories that it may have been dove before that, though. I've heard there's moorings on it going back a long time before that. But in any event, really, really cool dive that we're very proud of here in the Southwest Water Preserve. Come see that boat. You'll be impressed, and bring your camera. So
sounds like
we
a
also
really,
have the
go ahead.
I mean, it's a little ways offshore. It's about 9 miles from the South Haven Pierhead, and that's a pretty good haul. And you're actually going into the wind all the way there because you're running a south by southwest to get there. It's a lot smoother coming back usually than going out. If you do dive it, keep in mind though that a significant portion of the boat is deeper than sport depth. So only go basically the center line of the props is right about where you switch from sport depth to technical depth. Again, use your own computer, your own numbers there. Don't say just because the lakes are up right now, it might be higher now. It varies a little bit, but just keep in mind if you go out there that a significant portion of the boat is deeper than 130, and do not penetrate this wreck. It is possible to penetrate it. I only know of one person who's penetrated it. Actually, it was Jeff Voss within it, and if you talk to Jeff Voss, he'll tell you don't go inside. It was a very unpleasant situation for him, and he does not recommend it. So
So,
You don't got
Kevin,
to go inside to have a good dive.
we're coming up on about 5 minutes left. I know you wanted to talk a bit about the North Shore Tug and Calvin Devaney. What can you tell me about it?
Yes, the North Shore Tug is one of our other jewels here in the Southwestern Water Preserve. Uh, it actually was a salvage tug owned by Calvin Devaney. Calvin Devaney, throughout the 60s, was a shipwreck hunter, treasure hunter, map maker, jack of all trades here in the Great Lakes. Um, Sold a lot of maps, told a lot of stories. Remarkably colorful character here, and his ship, the North Shore, is now one of our dive attractions here. Uh, don't know exactly how it got there. I've heard all kinds of speculation, but I believe it was in the early '90s. The boat was languishing in bad shape on a dock, and managed to find its way on the bottom here in the Southwest Michigan Water Preserve. Today, it sits in 150 feet of water, and very much intact. The flying bridge is gone, but everything else is there. This is a boat you actually could probably raise if you wanted to. It's completely intact. Very cool wreck of getting those. It's down at 150. I think the high point on the wreck is about 138-ish. So it is outside of sport depth. You can get down to it. You can't touch it. You can get down deep enough to see it in sport depth, but it's a really cool wreck. I'm seeing a question in the chat room about the Ironsides. Ironsides is a great shipwreck, but it's not actually in the Southwest. It's actually in the West Michigan Water Preserve, just to the north of us. The slide that I had with the regulations on it protecting Great Lakes shipwrecks was actually of the Ironsides. Say the North Shore, really cool dive, fully intact tugboat. Here in the Southwest. We have hopes to buoy both the end of number 5 this year and the North Shore. The current health concerns these days may delay that. We'll see what happens from here. But we actually have plans in the works to buoy both the North Shore and the end of number 5 this year.
Very cool stuff, Kevin. I'm getting a little bit of feedback off of your speaker. Could you turn your volume down a little bit that my voice is coming through?
Yep, I'll bump it down a little bit.
Thanks.
I got you on like 70% right now.
All right. Yeah, I was
Bring
picking
it
up
down to about 50 then.
Thanks. We're good. All right. Well, Kevin, it sounds like, there's some really fascinating wrecks there. Honestly, I've not dived the Southwestern Michigan area before. I've done a lot of, obviously I've been there quite a lot. I've consulted on a couple of shoreline wrecks there, but I'm not much of a sport diver. Most people kind of know that about me. When I was young, I used to be more of a sport diver, but now I only dive wrecks if they're shallow or if I, they're brand new and I really need to take a look at them. But, I commend you on the education, certainly that you guys are doing, not just at the Southwestern Michigan Underwater Preserve, but on the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council. And I'll be honest with you, if you want somebody to, kind of take over stewardship of the Keweenaw Underwater Preserve, I'd be happy to do that. And actually, I know all the people who are originally involved in starting it. And, we're all still around. We just, moved on to other things when the sport diving up there kind of died off. So do contact me about it.
Be very careful what you ask for there, Brendan, because our board meeting for both the Southwest and the MUPC is this upcoming Saturday, or Sunday, actually. Oh. And I'm going to be dropping your name here and there. So be careful what you ask for. We may be adding a few duties on you, my friend. So
invite me to it. I'd be happy to, the Keweenaw Underwater Preserve, I doubt it'll ever, we're ever going to buoy the wrecks up there again, but I'd be happy to, act as a steward of it, because the parks does exist. So anyway, we're just about up on the hour. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us and for sharing with us some really interesting information, a lot of which was new to me, frankly, about the mooring buoys and how you guys do that, and the fact that we buoy our wrecks in Wisconsin as well, but nothing as elaborate, I think, as certainly as what you guys have in place with the DNR and with the Lake Carriers Association. I mean, that's really interesting stuff. So my hat's off to you, and thanks again, Kevin, for agreeing to come and be on the show.
Well, thank you for allowing me to get the word out about this a little bit more. I say this is a program which is currently underway. We are rather struggling right now, though. We only do have 3 preserves right now, which are actively buoying. We do have 2 more preserves which are coming online. The Straits Preserve, the West Michigan Water Preserve, and the Southwest are actively buoying right now. Uh, the Shortly we will have the Salinex Shores, then Whitefish Point buoying in the very near future. But like I say, there's a lot of hurdles you have to overcome on these as far as assembling the team and finding the funding for these things. Because keep in mind that just in materials for the larger buoys, we have about $1,200 a piece in these, and these are all paid for with Facebook fundraisers. We get donations. We actually had one of our buoys bought and paid for by the Mud Club, Dive Club out of Benton Harbor. We've had different shops make large donations to us. I don't know, I want me to plug organizations here, but it's all through donations to do this and volunteer work.
So, Kevin, how can people donate to the Mooring Buoy project? Is there a site? Is there a place on the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council website that people could donate?
Well, there's a couple different ways you can do it. On the Southwest Michigan Water Preserve page, I have an ongoing fundraiser there for our buoy project. If you look at the Southwest Michigan Water Preserve Facebook page, you'll see a fundraiser on there currently, and I usually have one going on there for one reason or another. Currently, we're taking contributions for buoying the North Shore Tug. We already have the money now to buoy the Ann Arbor, and we're looking to finish off money to buoy the North Shore. I believe that the West Michigan Water Preserve and the Straits Preserve also have their own Facebook pages, and from time to time we'll have these Facebook funders going on. Additionally, consider your Amazon purchases. Through Amazon Smile, you can donate, I think it's 0.5% or 1.5% of your total purchase goes into the Amazon Smile program. And now you have to set up your account to do this. And when you make the purchase, you have to select that you want to go to Amazon Smile. But think about how much money you spend on Amazon these days. And you can send that to, it's like 0.5%, but it's still, for me, that's a few $100 a year, okay? And you can have that sent to any 501c3 of your choice. And Michigan Underwater Preserve Council is a 501c3, and each individual preserve is a 501c3. So not all of them are as proactive as some others are for having these set up as far as the fundraisers, but there are ways to get us money through those means.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Got a couple of housekeeping things before we wrap up, Kevin. Just want to remind everybody about the Shipwreck Festival on Saturday. Full slate of presenters. Watch. I'm going to be posting some information about that tonight and tomorrow. And then next week, Wednesday night, join us for Mark Sprang, the archivist from the Historical Collections of the Great Lakes. Should be a great show. I've been looking forward to having Mark and to hearing all about their collections down there at Bowling Green. It's an amazing, amazing place, and I've been down there quite a few times over the years. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry I didn't get to all your questions. We ran a little bit over, but that's okay. We always do. Kevin, thanks so much again for doing this and for all the fascinating information you shared with us tonight. Stick around after the show, and we'll have a little chat, Kevin. And for everybody who joined us tonight, have a great evening. Stay safe. And we'll see you next week. Good night.
Thank you.